people today. They could spend half their lives over 50. That's a lot of living. So it helps to have a wise friend and fierce defender in your corner. A friend like AARP. So your health lives longer.
This is just slow-mo karate?
Just slow-mo karate.
Your money lives longer.
I just bought that.
I just sold that.
And your happiness lives longer. That's why the younger you are, the more you need AARP. Join today.
Welcome to AARP Illinois' virtual event. It's so wonderful to have you with us. AARP is on a mission to connect with individuals across various communities, especially those aged 50 and above. We're here to listen, understand, and address the unique needs of you and your community as we age. Our goal is to enrich your experience by expanding our local activities, providing opportunities for you to discover and engage with all that life has to offer right here in your own community and virtually. As we journey through today's event, we invite you to consider joining our dedicated team of AARP volunteers. It's a chance to make a meaningful impact and help us better serve those 50 plus across the nation. Connect with us and be a part of this vibrant movement toward positive change. Welcome, and let's make this event both fun and transformative.
Good morning and welcome to Retirement Planning for Caregivers. I'm Lori Hendren, Senior Associate State Director with AARP Illinois, and I'm glad you could join us today. We'll explore retirement planning tailored to caregivers and the unique financial pressures you may be experiencing. To shed light on this important topic, we have our special guest, Steve Andersson, an elder law attorney and contractual lobbyist for AARP Illinois. Welcome, Steve.
Good morning, Lori. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And we want to remind everyone joining us on Facebook and YouTube this morning, you can ask questions and share your comments in the social media feeds with today's guest. We will do our best to address as many of your questions and comments as possible during our conversation. And I think Steve and I would agree, after several years of hosting this series, your questions and comments are the very best part of this series. So again, we're going to be covering a broad range of topics that can serve as a starting point for discussions, planning, and consultation with your family and professional advisors in elder law, financial planning, and healthcare. But please keep in mind that the specifics of elder law may vary by jurisdiction, so consulting with an elder law attorney, tax attorney, or financial advisor is advisable for personalized guidance. And again, AARP is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and we are very excited to welcome you, our guests. And Steve, any opening comments, Steve, for our viewers today?
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here as always. This is always so much fun. I want to start with just two preliminary things. Number one is, like you said, Lori, this is not legal advice. Although I am a licensed attorney in Illinois, I'm not even giving legal advice for those of you in Illinois. What I'm trying to do is give you a generalized view of what the law might say about, the areas that we're talking about. I'm not targeting Illinois or anywhere specifically on that. So please understand that. And if you do find that there's some benefit, then I encourage you to talk to a practitioner in your jurisdiction, wherever that is, to get real solid advice for your jurisdiction. So that's number one. And number two is it's going to be okay. All right. That's one thing I like to say at the outset every time, because I find that a lot of practitioners like to sell their wares based on fear. Oh my God, if you don't do exactly everything, it's going to be a disaster. Now, there are things that can be better. There are things that can be worse. But at the end of the day, it's going to be all right. And we're going to try to make it a little better than all right by having this discussion. So with that, let's go.
All right, great. And reminding everyone, if you're listening to us, we want to hear from you. So please put your questions or comments in the feed, and I see them just in about 2 seconds. And then we're going to elevate those to Steve, because that's the most important part of this discussion, is helping you in your journey. So Steve, first question, what is the biggest retirement planning challenge for caregivers compared to non-caregivers?
Yeah, that's the thing, is technically, legally, there's no difference, right? If we're talking about retirement planning, we're talking about retirement planning for the caregiver. Well, okay, the same sorts of rules apply. But here's where I think the difference really lies, is that when you're thinking about your retirement, immediately you start wondering, well, what's going to happen to the person I'm giving care to? And so how do I plan both my own retirement, but as I think about my retirement, how do I make sure that the person I'm taking care of is adequately taken care of? Because I'm not going to be able to relax, if it were me, quite frankly, until I know that the person that I'm currently supporting is taken care of as well. So a lot of the strategies I think we might talk about today are about how do we transition? How do we properly transition from me, in this example, me being the caregiver, to somebody else potentially being the caregiver, while maintaining the dignity of both myself and, my well-being, but also the person that I'm caring for. Does that make sense, Lori?
Absolutely. And I think it's very interesting that in Illinois, AARP just came out, Steve, with information that says we have roughly 2.2 million unpaid family caregivers that some 6 in 10 are still working, and they're trying to balance the world as you're caring. But you have a lot of financial pressures, which are unique, I think, to family caregivers. So if you're listening, you may be able to identify with some of these like losses financially, which play into your retirement planning. 32% of who we polled just recently have stopped saving. 21% took on more debt. 16% used long-term savings, and even 3% filed for bankruptcy. So I think this conversation is very important. And then when we find out 4% put off retirement, yes, there is a distinction. Like you said, not legally, but in practicality, in real life and planning, there's some financial differences for folks. So we recognize, and that's one thing I think AARP did such a great job, is understanding the journey of caregivers and the uniqueness on what they give and how we can be able to assist on the way.
Really, we should those people too, because the fact that they are all willing, or you are all willing to love your loved ones and care for them uncompensated, you're actually taking a burden off the state. You're paying for it instead of the federal government or the state government. So, we owe you a debt of thanks, not just for the compassion that you give to your loved ones, but also for the services you're rendering, and sadly, uncompensated oftentimes.
Absolutely. And this follows into our next question. So nationally, AARP is advocating for a family caregiver income tax credit because we know, on average, now many of you folks listening may say that doesn't touch, the financial amount, but $7,200 is how much someone out of pocket shares with their caregiver or in the caregiving responsibilities annually. So nationally, we're advocating with Congress to have a caregiver tax credit. And then also, we're from the state of Illinois. We're doing the same thing here, as long as many of our other states. So know that we are hearing that financial burden. But I want to go to this question. What financial warning signs should caregivers watch for that may impact their long-term retirement security?
Yeah, so you actually identified a few of them in your examples of what people are doing today. Warning signs do include going into debt. That's one of the main things that you want to avoid as you're nearing retirement years, is you don't want to do that. Taking on additional debt that you probably don't have a plan to be able to repay, because I would suspect if you had a plan for it, you wouldn't be taking it out to begin with. So that's a huge warning sign. And don't get me wrong, I'm not shaming anyone for doing it. These are almost impossible choices. So you could say to me, well, Steve, I had no choice. I had to do it, or else X or Y would happen. Get it. Totally get it. No guilt about that. You probably made the worst or the best decision amongst bad choices. But at the same time, that's a huge warning sign to me. If you previously were paying into like a 401k or any sort of pension or any system like that, and you've stopped, or you're withdrawing money, pre-tax earnings, withdrawing money early, so now you're paying penalties on it. Mm-hmm. All of these things are warning signs that, unfortunately, I don't want to say you're living beyond your means, but the circumstances you've been placed in are forcing you to live beyond your means. And so that's where you really want to look hard at what options are out there to minimize that, whether that's public benefits, whether that's segregating your money for the person you're caring for in a special needs trust, an ABLE account. There are ways to do this. And I would encourage you to explore. If you want to talk to an attorney who specializes in it, great. If you don't want to, your area agencies on aging have a lot of this information. AARP has a lot of this information available as well. I don't want people to assume the only remedy is their own money. There are other ways to at least minimize it. SNAP benefits, those news a lot lately, but they exist. Try to find those opportunities to bring your spending in line with the lifestyle that you have and the income that you do have. So.
That is wonderful. And we're going to put in there, AARP worked with all of our state offices, and we prepared individual state resources. And I know our team has made sure the links and the phone numbers are correct. So our social media producer is going to put that in the feed, but you can go to your individual state and you can see what resources are available for you, because that is important. We know, and again, I'm from Illinois, so this is why I have these stats kind of off the top of my head. 47% of family caregivers take on some type of negative financial impact. And so it is, half of our population is enduring this, and this is very hard. It's very taxing. And like Steve said, this is a very hard conversation, is whether taking on the debt, putting your loved one in a nursing home and having to pay for that, spending down, making sure they can age at home. So there is a very hard balance there. And some of the things that we know is not having your bills paid, adding on to credit card debt because of, out-of-pocket expenses. It is a hardship. So we hear that. And if you hear my puppy, she's crying in the background. I apologize. What legal documents should caregivers and their loved ones have in place to safeguard finances and their future?
So again, this is kind of similar to what I would give, the same advice I would give to any person, is you need a few documents in place to take care of yourself and the person that you're caring for in the event of your own incapacity. So that's a power of attorney for healthcare, power of attorney for property. That's what we call them in Illinois. They could be called just a durable power of attorney in other states. They might have different names, but the concept is the same. You appoint someone to take care of decision-making on both your own health care and on behalf of your property, your money, your assets, things like that. But then the other document I want you to think about, or documents, is planning documents for the person you're caring for. Because that's going to be a big concern, obviously, that if you became incapacitated, who's making decisions on their behalf? Now, depending on the circumstances of that person, they may or may not be able to execute a power of attorney, because you have to be competent to be able to do that. And depending on your circumstances, they may not be anymore. So now the question is, okay, you've been doing it, freely and of your own volition, but who's going to do that now? Oftentimes that remedy is a guardianship. They may call it something else in other states called guardianship here, but that's where you go to court and you ask the court to appoint someone to do that. That's a possibility, and you'd want to do that in advance. In other words, if you feel like this is a threat that you might become incapacitated, that's something that you can think about. Now, if the person is competent, and by the way, you don't have to be perfect to execute a power of attorney. If your loved one is competent to execute it, then have them do it too. Have them name not just you, but maybe 2 or 3 other successors, so that there's always someone that is going to be taking care of them.
There you go. I went off mute. I'm so sorry. So if you're listening, make sure you put your questions or comments in, because we're here for 30 minutes and we have 15 more minutes to answer them. So let's go to, when should a caregiver consider consulting with an elder law attorney about long-term care planning, or an attorney? They have so much on their plate and working and maybe even caring for their own kids, their spouse. At what point do you kind of bite the financial bullet and say, okay, I need some help planning? Is it 5 years? Is it when maybe mom or dad is diagnosed with a condition? Or is it, 1 year before you think they're decline in health?
So I would say the earlier the better. So when you identify that there's an ongoing condition that's probably not going to resolve itself, that maybe will be deteriorating, like Alzheimer's or one of those terrible, terrible diseases, I would go sooner than later because, for example, if your loved one is still of capacity, they can participate then in the planning. And if things get worse, then the plan, the plan you've created is in line with their values. Because of course, we're always trying to make sure that we're honoring people's wishes. We do the very best that we can, but at the end of the day, if mom or dad or a son or daughter want a certain thing to go a certain way, we try to make sure that happens. That's just dignified, and respectful to them.
Yeah. Okay. So we're talking about, I'm sorry, keep going.
Yeah. To your point, the earlier, the better. I would tell people once they're of their well, I guess you don't have to do it when you're 18, but let's say, when you become, kind of in the workforce world, married, significant other, it's time to talk to an attorney then. And you can even bring up issues about your parents, for example. Let's say you're 20-something. I tell you to go do it. And if your family has a history of some of these declines, that's a great conversation to have. You don't have to be elderly to see an elder law attorney. They're there to help you make sure that you can be elderly at some point and live with dignity. And same with your mom and dad in that example.
Okay. So I think this goes back to a good point. Financial hardships, money is tight. And when you're trying to pay for maybe your loved one's medication or incontinence items, paying for attorneys really rough, so is there free legal services? Where should someone go if they just need to start this conversation?
Yeah, there are. Every state has some level of what we call pro bono legal services or free legal services and legal aid clinics, associations. You'd have to search by your own state, and usually they're regional. So there'll be, some in, Northern Illinois, some in Central Illinois, some in Southern Illinois, same with any other state. And you can search for those online. I mean, you can Google them, but that's not the best. I would say probably go to the local bar association. Like I live in Kane County, Illinois. So if you Googled Kane County, Illinois Bar Association, it would pull it up and it would offer, here's a list of pro bono attorneys, and here's a list of legal aid clinics in the area that you can get some free advice from. Now, is that going to be perfect or complete? No, but it's an excellent start. If you don't want, and I get it, nobody wants the money, especially if they need it for caregiving. That's a good place to begin.
Wonderful. We're going to put something in there. Is the LSC, the Legal Services Corporation, America's Partner for Equal Justice, but you can be able to find a legal aid organization in your area. So let's see if we have any questions. I guess everyone's being very quiet right now, which is okay, but we do miss your comments. How do powerless attorneys and advance directives support long-term financial planning?
Yeah, so they do in the very direct way of allowing, and an important caveat, this is where the generic form power of attorney for property, for example, may be limited. So this is an important point. So number one, you execute a power of attorney. And if all you can do is just the basic one, do that, because that's a great start. But when we're talking about planning for other people or planning for your own incapacity, and you can do both, you can specify in the power of attorney a lot more detail about how you want your money to be spent. Because most of the time, the person who is your agent, the person who's working on your behalf as your power of attorney, their duty is to you. In other words, their job is to protect your assets for you. But you might be saying, no, I want you to use my assets for the person I was caregiving for before I took ill, or whatever the circumstances were. That might not be kosher, if you will, with a normal power of attorney. but you can amend it, you can adapt it. But that's where the skills of like an elder law attorney really come into play, because you want to be able to allow that person, your agent, to be able to spend money not on you, just to draw down your assets to protect somebody else. So it's a very important aspect of how you consider the power of attorney. But like I said, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. If all you can do is just the standard form power of attorney, do it, because it's a great, great start.
Great. How can Social Security claiming decisions be affected by caregiving rules or career interruptions?
Yeah, so obviously a career interruption, if you're in the process of earning your points for Social Security and you have to stop working, let's say you're below the points, where we all work a number of quarters, it's probably like 30 years or something like that, until we qualify. If you stop working, you're not earning those anymore. And so so it would be important to consider alternate ways of continuing to earn Social Security, or not earn Social Security, earn the points that qualify you for Social Security. For example, part-time work still qualifies for it. Consider remote work. Maybe you can do both. Maybe you can be a caregiver and still work some sort of a job. The important thing is to continue to earn those quarters so that you're able to qualify when the time comes. Hopefully that's not anybody's circumstance, but it can happen. It absolutely can.
What happens when a caregiver depletes their savings? They think of someone who's saved their money. Now they're taking care of mom and they're depleting that. How will that affect their livelihood and retirement?
Boy, that's tough. I always say it's going to be all right, but that's a challenge if you don't have any savings. Hopefully you have income, even if you have no savings. And at that point, though, this is something I don't normally enjoy bringing up, but Lori, you mentioned earlier that about 4% of people declare bankruptcy, or maybe it was 3%. That is an actual legitimate option in those circumstances, because I'm assuming if you have no savings, you're probably also running into debt. Okay, if that's the case, bankruptcy is actually an option. It becomes a clean slate, if you will, which allows you then to be able to start over, if you will. It is not shameful. It is, especially if you have very little to no assets, it becomes a circumstance where you are able to really get clear of those debts or those obligations early on. And then, of course, if you have very little income, if you have very little assets, then you can qualify, for example, for Medicaid. You can qualify for SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. There are a lot of government programs when you literally have nothing. Now, I'm not telling you that's like a good idea or a great option, but we're talking about tough circumstances here. But understand this, there are always options like that. There really are.
So can you talk to caregivers about and explain what is the look back we hear commonly when someone's looking at possibly going into a nursing home?
Sure. So this is true for anyone, and although a lot of these rules vary state by state, the look back period is the period of time during which, when you apply for Medicaid, for public benefit to take care of you or your loved one, this works for the person you're caregiving for as well. They're going to look at your assets and say, in the last 5 years, right, 60 months, in the last 5 years, have you given away any money? If the answer is no, no problem. Then you either qualify or don't based on your assets and income. If the answer is yes, you did give away money during that 5-year look back period, or looking back, if the answer is yes, you did, and you did it without getting anything for it, so you literally like gave it away to your kids or something like that, that would create a penalty period where the government will not cover you for the same amount of time that you could have lived on the money that you get. So that could be a lot. Let's say that, let's assume that the average price of a nursing home is, I'm just going to say $10,000 a month, right? Maybe that's too high, maybe it's too low, depends on where you are. And you gave away $50,000 4 years ago, right? Long before you were ever thinking about this issue, but you gave it away to your grandchildren or something like that. Everything was fine. Then things weren't fine. So you gave that money away, $50,000. Because it's within that look back period, they're going to apply the penalty now, right? Not 4.5 years ago, now. And if we use my example of 50,000 and 10,000 per month, that's 5 months that they won't pay for your nursing home care. So you have to be aware of that so you don't accidentally end up with no government benefit for that period of time, because then I don't know how I don't know how that works other than finding a way to beg, borrow, or well, not steal, but that's finding a way to get through that. That's why it's very important to keep track of these things. The government will actually require you to submit all of your paperwork for the last 5 years: bank accounts, savings accounts, investment accounts. They're going to look. So
Yeah. So here's a follow-up question. So what happened if you this doesn't apply to the caregivers money. This applies to the individual who would be the recipient of nursing home care. Is that correct?
right.
Okay.
If we're talking about putting the person who you're currently taking care of, placing them into a nursing home, we're talking about their money, not your money. Your money is not responsible for them.
Okay. So one, I'm going to go back to the look back period. If you, let's say I'm going to be going to a nursing home and I have $100,000 I have saved, but I'm going to buy each of my kids a car and I deplete the 100,000, I'm purchasing an item, but it is for someone. Is that something that you can get penalized for?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Whether it's cash or whether it's something of value, like a car, it doesn't matter. If you give it away without compensation, then you're going to be penalized. And if they see a car, being purchased, or 5 cars, something like that, they're going to ask where those cars went. They're not just going to let that fly. And by the way, can you get away with small things, Christmas gifts of money and cash? Sure, absolutely. They are not evil people. They're trying to do the best job that they can, but they're not going to let major expenditures like that fly. So you do have to be concerned about it. Oh, and if I can add one other thing on that. Oftentimes people get confused and they'll say, well, can't I give away $10,000 every year to, my children or whatever without any penalty? And the answer is yes, for tax purposes, not for Medicaid purposes. So don't confuse that. There is no exemption for, any amount of money being given away other than the incidental Christmas gift for Medicaid purposes, for qualifying for nursing home care. They are not the same. They work very differently.
We have a question that says, excuse me, is there an exception to look back period for giving money excuse me, to family members for an emergency?
No, although you could argue it. And so there is no technical exemption, but we have in my practice, we have gone to, in Illinois, it's the Department of Public Health, and we have argued when somebody's been denied on that basis. We have successfully argued, here's the circumstances that the family was faced with, and this is the decision that they had to make, and ask for a waiver of that rule. And can I guarantee that will work? No, but I would try. If it was big enough, and if you literally had no money then to support yourself, I would absolutely try.
Okay, well, we have come down to our 30 minutes. So I think we've gone through a lot of great information. And again, if you are a caregiver, we hear you and we recognize the financial challenges you're facing and you're balancing a lot. So no AARP is here for you. We've posted a lot of resources, but make sure you take a look at the AARP state resources specifically so you can find respite care. If you need home delivered meals for your loved one, all of that information will be there. But I'm going to let Steve give us our closer for as we go into our holiday season.
Thank you. And yes, I want to wish happy Thanksgiving to everyone. I hope that it's a wonderful time with family and friends. But the thing I would say is, I usually say it's going to be okay, but I don't want to say that today because I know how hard this can be. I want to say that there's always hope. All right. In all of these circumstances, there is always hope. And the best thing that you can do is educate yourself on these ideas, these issues. Listening today is a start, but absolutely not a finish. Try to find free advice if you can. Paid advice, I would suggest it's worth an hour of your time to pay an attorney to talk with you. Find good education on this, and there will be hope. There will be ways to maybe not make it great, but it'll be okay.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we're also putting in there the AARP caregiving resources. If you're able to take a moment, looking on your phone, on your computer, your iPad, AARP is dedicated to putting forth a wealth of information that really is going to match you where you are. If you're starting looking for information, if you're in the middle or you're at the very hard part, we have that information and support. We have so much out there, Facebook groups, just groups and support systems for you. So please engage with us. Again, I want to thank Steve Andersson. As always, you make something very complicated understandable. We want to thank you for joining us today, and continue to look to AARP for your resources, and have a wonderful day. This concludes our virtual event.